Mr. Pop.
Beginning in radio, through to sound systems, block parties, and disco, the role of the DJ was to curate and introduce new sounds to new audiences. New technology and the DJ's influence has changed the music industry. But how has the role of the DJ changed?
When I first started, it was a combination of breaks. You take old soul records and old disco records and find that one little section, and you take 2 copies of it and extend the break.
You know, this was almost the pre-hip-hop era, so this was more funk and soul, and it wasn't genre specific. It wasn't like it had to be this, this, or this. If it made people move, you know, you played it.
And then from Chicago came house music, and that just completely changed the scape of dance music as we knew it. But there was something very visceral about it, very guttural. You know, you played at a club, the kick was just louder than, you know, the usual kick drums from any other old disco record, even a breakbeat record. The rhythm was faster than hip hop, and it was just very driving.
The sounds of Chicago and Detroit quickly spread throughout the European club scene, propelled by the rise of the independent record label.
I guess it was, you know, the resonance of what happened in the clubs in New York and Chicago that ended up through the airwaves coming to this little town in the east of the Netherlands and inspired me to do what I do today.
It's pretty much the same old story up until like 20 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, that you'd hear it on the radio, then you'd go to the record shop and want to buy it, and then you'd talk about it with friends.
I found music originally via pirate radio. It was the best thing ever. I'd fight falling asleep until I'd turn the tape over.
Back then it was sort of just tape trading, swapping, and a friend of mine would copy me all his like 92 sort of hardcore rave tapes, Science, Slipmat and all that stuff.
But radio really, yeah, and then obviously working in a record store.
I worked in my friend's record shop when I was like 14.
I worked in the record shop and got paid in vinyl. I don't think any money ever exchanged hands.
It was the best job in the world, really. Music would find you, more or less. Like, I'd go back there, like, actually I say that, it's quite drastic.
You had to live in London or in Berlin or in Chicago to get the hot records at the hottest record stores. And that would set a DJ apart. It would be, you know, giving a DJ a unique selling point, really, just because he would have a record that no one else had.
I grew up in the countryside, a little bit outside of Hamburg, and it was really a mission to get new music. There was one store that was selling vinyl, but also TVs and radios. Not CDs back then, what was it, tapes, basically. It really depended on what the store was selling, so basically that store was the filter of my music back then.
You'd wait for Friday. Friday would come and you'd be like, you wouldn't leave, no one would leave. The distributor's late, still there at 8 o'clock, my mum's ringing me, so where are you? But I do really miss that hunting, that waiting, because you valued it. That was the thing, with vinyl you valued it because you were paying for it. Like you couldn't have it, you'd have to go and watch a certain DJ to hear the record a lot of the time.
Back in the day, you know, I'd go to a club and I'd get so influenced by what I was doing musically by listening to Larry Levan or T. Scott or Mark Kamens or Jelly Bean Benitez. You'd have to climb to the booth and hopefully the guy would like tell you what the record was, which a lot of times like Bambaataa would cover up his record so no one could see what it was.
So I loved the structure of doing a track, doing the rounds. Like in a club, nobody used to know what it was just like that tune. And hits were made. A song would build up and everyone sort of found out together. And then by the time it was out, everyone could get their hands on it at the same time.
If you're at a club and you hear a track and it's moving the crowd and it's moving you want to have that track to play because that's how people make up their sets.
I ended up becoming one of the people that I listened to, you know, back in the late 80s. And then hopefully I inspire people to do what I do, you know, in the same way that people have inspired me.
If there was a run of a record and that record sold out, you almost couldn't get that record anymore.
At that time, back in '99, people started burning CDs as well, and me as a producer, I just put the two together.
I remember Will and I doing an album, and I convinced the record company to press me up 500 instrumental copies of the album. I sent off almost a bunch of sounds that I wanted. So when they pressed them up, I almost had my own sounds that I could kind of manipulate. The CDJ was the start of I don't need that anymore.
The launch of the CDJ, closely followed by the affordable CD burner, marked the initial transition from vinyl to digital playback.
I was like, wait a minute, if I could burn CDs and there's these CD player with a pitch adjustment on it, then I can test my tracks as well.
I think that was a big change for a lot of DJs, and a lot of old school DJs didn't want to let go of the art. And there is something special about touching a piece of plastic, as weird as that sounds.
A lot of DJs transitioned very slowly, whereas I just made the cut.
There was a big shift that was going on in terms of how DJs got their music. We started noticing these new portals opened up.
I think it slowly transitioned as the equipment evolved, and being able to buy those tracks as an MP3 and then being able to burn them on CD was a whole new thing.
A completely different product had a major impact on the entire music world, especially the DJ world, and that was the iPod. And what happened was people buying music physically declined.
When the download would become more apparent and buying records became less apparent, I was losing hand over fist on selling records. We went from 8,000 to 76543. We were lucky to sell 700 records on per release.
In 2003, if you said internet and music, most people would think you're talking about downloading illegally.
One by one, distribution companies were going down. But what was really great was that the music was becoming, I would say, accessible. People were searching and finding, they want to know more about what's going on. So brilliant for people who were making music. They were like, right, I'm going to make a track and then stick it up on Beatport or trackitdown.com or any way that you can get my records, it's going to be there.
I think while in the past the challenge was to find good music, these days the challenge is not to get too much music, so you can really pick the good stuff.
Promo-wise, I've probably been sent, let's say 30 promos today.
Sometimes it would just take me days. I'd literally wake up in the morning, get a bit of food and just sit there at my laptop going, and there'd be a lot of music which wasn't very good.
So these days it's way cheaper, everybody can produce music.
The big change for me was obviously analog to digital. All of a sudden it was able for someone in the far outskirts to get a hold of, a hot record, where it used to be based around the cities really.
We had so much access to the samples and Sample City, and we could find so much stuff on the internet, and obviously people could find us.
The press used to control music, and now everyone can be their own press agent.
Social media is super important these days. It's basically the backbone of your popularity.
It was the people involved as well. Facebook and Twitter wasn't really around then, so it was MySpace and Dubstep Forum, people that were recording these files and then uploading them, and then you could always tell by how many people had commented whether your song was big.
SoundCloud is just insane. You can actually go on there to find one producer, he likes another. You can end up on there for hours, like Plastician's crazy for that. It was easier for them to find music on SoundCloud than it was for people.
I've probably spent more time listening to new music now than I have at any point since the mid-90s. And now I feel like we're at a point where it's really easy and user-friendly, be able to quickly build a set that same day with that new music and be out that night and play it.
In 2009, the CDJ 2000 marked the final stage of the transition to digital. Large record collections could now be stored and transported on a single USB stick. And the introduction of Rekordbox meant DJs had even more creative control.
The best thing about Pioneer is that they've really helped a soft transition between working from vinyl and then going into the digital age and everything that came with it.
Well, the Rekordbox software became a very integral part of the entire Pioneer experience. It allowed me to really organize myself and also to access things and know this is new, this is older, constantly refresh what I do.
I was able to program the cue points and make track lists in the plane or while traveling to a show.
It's allowed me to be able to manipulate any element musically and create a different effect that I would normally have to do with the computer or with something else and do it live.
The advent of digital music, digital technology has really started to open up people's minds, and it changed the way that people started to mix. The mixing techniques evolved because you could trigger that sample there, you're going to trigger that loop there, or doing it all from a controller or running DVS. It's much more of a construction thing. It's not purely playing one track to another track. One thing's kind of pushing the other. The producers are pushing the DJs to do new things, the DJs do new things, and then the producers are picking up on it. They're kind of feeding each other, they're almost bouncing off each other.
The development of affordable music production software combined with cheap online distribution enabled unlimited creativity without the need for expensive hardware setups. The lines between DJing and producing were starting to blur.
See, the big shift in DJing is the producers who used to make music for the DJ now want to be the DJs.
Back in the days, producing was more expensive than these days.
All I knew was you either had like 30 grand studio or that you didn't make music.
With Planet Rock, we had one delay, one reverb, one drum machine, 2 synths, and we had a great board. We had the Neve. Nowadays, you have more of that technology in your phone.
I remember Coma Cat I produced in my super small bedroom. My monitor speakers back then, they were like super cheap, like desktop speakers from the electronica store.
And I got this program called Music, and I was just making these beats on the PlayStation, then recording them to MIDI disc, and then taking them into Big Apple.
For someone starting out now, the world's your oyster. It's all there for you.
What has changed is the names of the game. The fact that a DJ is now a spoken out contributor to pop music is incredible. Like Calvin Harris 30 years ago was named John Jellybean Benitez, and he wrote a record with Madonna called Holiday, and that launched, Madonna's career. If that would happen today, it would have been Calvin Harris featuring Madonna.
But it's so competitive because everyone can do it. Everyone can be a record producer, everyone can be a DJ. So to stand out, you need some really good ideas.
Style, you can adapt your own style, but as a sound, how do you make something new now?
Releasing music was way more expensive than it is today, so the cost of releasing music was working as a filter.
The digital music explosion meant DJs and fans were spoiled for choice. But it was harder than ever to earn money through making music. Something had to change.
At the very start of what we consider to be dance music today was really born of people who were making their businesses out of nightclub back rooms or out of bedrooms. So whilst electronic music was challenging and pushing at the boundaries of the live experience and technology and what could be done in a studio, the infrastructure around the industry was largely unchecked. In the moment of our success and the peak that electronic music's having, there are artists and DJs who have second jobs and third jobs who are jacking it in, and we've lost incredible people from our industry. You're in this incredible position where you can produce a track, make the track available, and within a week that track is being played by thousands of DJs to hundreds of thousands of people. Well, that's incredible for generating interest, access and audience. It's not generating royalties. All of a sudden we've got technology in the likes of Kuvo, where as a producer you can literally go on a Monday morning and go, was my music played in nightclubs over the weekend? Who played it? Did people enjoy it? Did people react to it? All of a sudden you can see the results of your work.
Considering how much money electronic music is creating, it would make it just way more fair for electronic producers. And it will really mirror what gets played out there.
When you start getting rewarded for the music that you made because the DJ that played it made sure that data passed through, the reward for that brilliance goes back to the person that made that music. That's, for me, is what it's all about. And so that artists can make music and make money. And I think we're nearly there. I think after a few lean years, we're back in a place where all of this is going to come back together again.
Personally, I discover new music through other DJs' playlists. I think it's great if other people have the opportunity to see their favorite DJ and they can check what he's playing.
And in the future, you'll see a lot more interaction from the crowd and the DJ while DJing.
That's what the internet has provided. There's so many different ways you can approach it and come into it and play it. It's just a matter of sort of hooking into enough people to make it worth your while.
I still translate what I feel is the pulse out there. If anything, I get paid to filter through, 5,000 records and play 50.
I gravitated more to the person playing the music than the person listening to the music, to watch the level of control they had over people with the music that they played. They could basically set the tone of an emotion.
Those were are my proudest moments, when I feel like I'm doing something substantial, something that's unique, something that stands out.
What I try to do now is create a record that people might dance to. That's the starting point.
The industry has been forever changed by what Pioneer has brought, from vinyl to CD to now the digital download world. All of those things have been placed in the DJ's hands, and a lot of this was possible only because of the ability of Pioneer to give the DJs the tools to then turn that into a performance.
It was a long journey. I mean, it's funny because it started basically with 2 turntables and a mixer, and it turned into making records, and then it turned into producing records. But the 2 turntables and a mixer never went anywhere. That was always the foundation of everything.
And I think that I'm always curious to see what's coming next. And Pioneer is in my space and what I do. Pioneer is a company that I always look to see what is coming next.